Here we go. Hello, everybody. This is Dan Winter, and we're here about fractalgut.com, Grand Unified Theory, the Golden Toe Theory of Everything, with Mark Rohrbar, our attendant physics genius here. And we're a fun team, and we're here to tell you how much fun and how profound it is to understand a unified field based on pure principles. So this is really going to be a serious introduction where the beginning parts are for science-minded general people in the public, and the conclusion parts are for serious physicists who see that this is so profound and elegant where we start with pure principle and we derive all of physics from simple wave mechanics. This is cool, man. It's like so satisfying. So
Yeah.
I'm Dan Winter. You know who I am, fractalfield.com, fractalgut.com, and my background, electrical engineering, systems analyst, University of Detroit, psychophysiology graduate school, 30 years teaching physics of consciousness, running electric motor and engineering businesses, and now about 20 years as an inventor, developing plasma tech and regenerative field tech and negentropic field tech like FiRay.com. And Mark, do you want to introduce some background about you, please?
Yeah, I've been an electrical design engineer since 1984. Started in 81. Went to the University of Cincinnati and was studying electrical engineering and really wanted to get into chip design, analog electronics, and digital. So I went in, I graduated in 84 with EE, started working for Texas Instruments, where I got my master's at SMU, Southern Methodist University. While I'm working with the process engineers at Texas Instruments, they have their own fabs. So I'm writing the design rules with the fab guys that we designers use to design chips. So even before as I'm learning to be a designer, I'm helping write in the design rules.
And
So
understanding how the field effects fit together inside the integrated circuit chips, basically.
right. And the reason why I'm able to do that is I studied the solid state physics my senior year. Got to specialize in that. So I guess I'm getting into the story and the details at the same time, if that's all right. This is kind of important. The physics. See, I'm just a chip designer, so I started focusing on the physics, talking to all the physics guys, the fab guys, the designers, really learning this stuff. And here was the key thing. They said, one of my first assignments was to design a band gap voltage reference. That means an absolute value, 1.25 volts. How in the world am I going to make an absolute value? So it turns out right from you can derive all this stuff from the band gap of silicon, Schrodinger wave equation. Papers on, I didn't have to worry about it. Already done. Widlar and all those guys already did it. However, understood the physics and saw, wow, it should be this voltage, temperature coefficient. So I'm early on in my career learning how to tie the equations to what I measure because not everybody knows, like, for example, how do you know how much to angle down a roof? If you're you cut some boards off, what's the angle you cut it so that you get a foot drop at a 12-foot distance? We just use two different ways to do it, the arc length and simple geometry. Who would ever think that the numbers should line up with the physical world is what I'm talking about. Well, I played around with that in high school. The teacher teaching us how to measure the height of a telephone pole with the shadows and trig and all that stuff. So all of a sudden I'm getting a feel that these equations can map to the physical world. Not everybody has that feeling. Well, I got it early on
Mhm.
for geometry. Then I go to the voltage from the Schrodinger wave equation early on in my career when I'm in my 20s. I'm 64 now. So studying that stuff, and my background is circuit design and just my hobby is physics. And the whole thing, and that's what we're talking about today. This is where it's serious. My high school chemistry teacher told me about the proton, told the whole class last day of junior year about the proton to electron mass ratio and how they drop it out of the equation for solid state. And if you look at solid state theory, and this is where it's serious and then fun at the same time. The reduced mass assumption is, we're already into it, but it's all right. The reduced mass assumption is dropping off the electron to proton mass ratio. You do that because then you can solve the equations. Boom, you got solid state technology, and here we are today. Well, and that's the shut up and calculate that Elizabeth Rauscher complained about. So now it brings us back to the idea of, we've introduced who we are. I've done chip design. That's all I've done in commercial area. So now we're talking about the proton to electron mass ratio, and that's where we're going to start off, and then with simple stuff, and then show how serious it is.
Yes.
Now, the simple, I want to reiterate, the proton to electron mass ratio, anybody can measure that. I mean, it's not easy. I don't care what units it are. As long as you ratio it out, you get a unitless value, the 1,836.15267. Okay. That pure number is what we're talking about today. And that's going to be axiom 4 of our 5 axioms. Now,
Yes. This is where
we want to let everybody know these are draft papers. So the axioms have been renumbered a couple times through the blog, but we're eventually going to have them nailed down. So axiom 4 we're going to talk about today is the proton electron mass ratio. And Dan, I should share my screen so we can, is that all right?
Sure.
Are you
Mark
ready to
mentioned
go in that?
Mark mentioned Elizabeth Rauscher, whom
Oh,
we
yeah, go ahead.
knew very well when I was young, also, and also we sponsored in Europe many times. And Elizabeth Rauscher, one of the world's most famous physicists, her famous dream—that's the reason she started the Fundamental Physics Research Group, where we all started together out of Stanford. The dream of that whole movement was understand all physics from the base root of pure principle in wave mechanics. Pure ratio, pure principle. If you understood all of physics from pure principle, suddenly you can derive all of physics from one base simple understanding how waves work. And that's where these axioms are moving. Go ahead, Mark.
Yeah, right. And you're getting a little more advanced. I like to go a little slow because we are coming from the mainstream physics. We're not changing anything. That's the beauty of what you've been talking about for years. Nobody has to learn anything new. You just have to add a couple things. It's so the idea we're talking about uh, is this proton electron mass ratio. But let's go back to Elizabeth Rauscher, Dr. Rauscher, and the constants. And this is where I started too. When my chemistry teacher mentioned this big equation, it turns out it's the Rydberg equation. I was too young to know. You got this Rydberg polynomial that comes from analyzing the hydrogen atom. Everybody knows this. You got to know this stuff. I mean, some of it's complicated, but we'll get to explain why, and it's simple. So once people start analyzing let's go back to the wave equation for a second. That's real advanced Stringer wave equation. It's tough for most people to deal with. However, we're going to make it simple, and then we're going to make it even more simple. Everybody, like electrical engineers, know that second order wave equations, it's so easy, sinusoidal, exponentials, whatever. The wave equation solutions, quantized, it's so easy once you learn it that should not be in anybody's way of saying, oh, it's too hard. But I'm not talking about people who don't know math. I'm talking about the ones who know math. Anyways, the wave equations aren't that hard. When you realize that, and they've already been solved for the hydrogen atom, a lot of this stuff really falls out. Now, when you oversimplify, that's what they've done. So my original thing was just to get the equation for this ratio, and I didn't know what it implied. The chemistry teacher and the calculus teacher, that's Mr. Moore and Leslie Jackson, they were saying this someone who figured this out would be famous. Well, I didn't know why. I didn't know what it was. So I'm just working on it, for fun. So here's what it is. That's why I'm babbling on. Uh,
Maybe blow up
let's
that page.
say I'm
Yeah.
going to click on this. What would it imply if someone had a valid derivation of the proton-electron mass ratio? And I already have it up here. Now, this is take a fresh Grok 4 session. You can see this okay, Dan?
Yes, yes, very clear.
Took a fresh Grok 4 session. I'm not preloading it. Anybody can maybe cheat and whatever. We're not about that. Fresh Grok 4. Ask it, what would it imply if someone had a valid derivation of proton to electron mass ratio? Now, this is after the July 4th when Grok is telling me we got not a solution to the proton radius puzzle. We got a gut and a super gut and a toe. That's when I started sending you all these messages and we got going again.
So they
This it, this simple question, it comes back and it says a valid derivation would have profound implications for theoretical physics, particularly in the context of the quantum electrodynamics, QED, the standard model, this whole thing. And Grok goes over all the different things. Now,
unification
we
of
we kind
forces,
of we kind of
origin
knew
of
this.
mass, origin of
Yeah,
mass, unification. This is wonderful.
yeah. So basically, a valid derivation of the proton electron mass ratio unifies, is what it says here. It somewhere down here at the summary it says a valid derivation would be a landmark achievement bringing QED, unveiling new physics. So that's what we're doing.
Yep.
Okay, I didn't know that that's what this implied until recently. I just knew that, go back to the idea of Elizabeth Raucher, when I was talking to her, I wanted to get all the constants. So if you get the full Rydberg equation, for the electron mass, you
Just
have like,
blow that up. Just click on that so they can
yeah,
see
I'll
it.
click on it.
Yeah.
Yeah, there's
That's
more to it. Like this is just the proton electron mass ratio. But if we take and this, I'm showing this one because this is the one where I made a mistake. It should be R infinity here. If we plug in the equation for R infinity instead of the Rydberg constant for hydrogen, R infinity is just the infinite mass proton. It's the standard Rydberg constant. It has electron charge to the fourth, all this stuff in there. So that's the polynomial. If you add this back to it, then you get this polynomial, which that's what my blog was about for 10 years. It's almost like, because I had this error in it, I had the infinity and the RHs mixed up. Anyways, the point is from that whole Rydberg equation, Elizabeth Rauscher and I were thinking, wow, we should be able to solve for the constants. And everybody knows if you have more variables and equations, it's hard to do that. But so that's what I was trying to do at first. However, when you look at it more wholly, uh, like Grok is doing and what I was attempting to do, it's not just about, hey, you got some equations you can solve for it. All of a sudden, where you want to take it to is the wave mechanics. And that's where I was saying you were getting ahead of me. So at first, I'm just playing with the hydrogen atom, the equations and stuff like that. But this is all fun and games. You have to have first principles. What is it rooted in? And that's where you got ahead of me with the wave mechanics. Now, when we start looking at the proton as the vortex and the superfluid ether, and that's so we already did those videos and we're going to do more, but we're invoking a superfluid type
Right.
vacuum ether, restoring that. With that, then all of these equations like
Yeah.
start falling out. It's geometric, and that's where it starts getting the the hard stuff becomes simple whenever people start realizing, and Haramain's been through it 10, 20, 30 years, and so have you with the solutions. But when you take it to like the vacuum, you can actually use geometric principles and derive all this stuff. We've done it with the Compton confinement. You can just assume a Planck vacuum density of the PSUs. So
Let,
all of
let,
this stuff comes out. Well, when I found that circular quantized superfluid gave N, which means it's quantized, and then we've developed that to the complex Q number
let's
instead of
let's
just
give some
doing
let's give some background on that. So remember
yeah
I had spent half a lifetime here. I had discovered that Planck multiplied by integer exponents of golden ratio fractality recursion perfected generated at least 200 profound physical variables, planckfire.com and elfie.link. And then separately, profoundly, Mark had developed this new way of profoundly understanding from pure principle the radius slash diameter of a proton based on simple wave mechanics. It's literally if you knew how fast a tornado was turning, a tornado is a vortex, right? The vortex of
yeah
charge in the superfluid. And so, using simple vorticity in charge, suddenly Mark has a profound understanding predicting what the diameter of the proton should be based on a simple tornado of that superfluid of charge. And then Mark took golden ratio multiples of that radius diameter and generated a whole other additional nest of profound physical variables, including stuff up to galaxy size. And that's how this really took off. But maybe Mark, now if you want to show your proton radius, I mean, basically, you got a tornado made of charge. And if you know certain things about that tornado, you predict the proton radius. I mean,
yeah right. So see, I just while you're talking, I clicked in a Google AI mode just to get the equation for the circular quantized superfluid, you know.
of tornado.
And- yeah, and this is the equation we're using. This is a circular. It means you do the full circle integral. And you get quantized n as the quantum number. And we're talking about circular quantized superfluid flow, whether it's cymatics, wave equation. It's like a group velocity. You're pumping it, modulating or whatever to get the energy right, the frequency right. So you got to stir the superfluid, you know. So we got to figure out how to do that in the vacuum. Right now, we're talking about like a superfluid helium or something like that, but we got to learn how to actually manipulate the vacuum engineering stuff. That's, we got to develop some technology for that. But the idea is I'm putting this equation. When I found this, it's in my blog 7, 8 years ago, maybe more. Like I said last time, these energies were so big, I was like, I'm not going to mess with that. Well, it turns out all you got to do is quantize the proton, just like they've been quantizing the electron. Now we're back to serious physics. It's like, okay, we're not changing physics. We're saying, hey, you guys quantize the electron. Now let's do it with the proton. Hey, and by the way, let's correct the reduced mass assumption. Now, you want to carefully look at the math because I've done it before. And here I'm taking the characteristic equations without going through it real carefully again
But
to make sure I'm
maybe you want to
mathematically, I
bring
want
up
to make sure the only thing I may be skipping is the key thing here is solving the boundary value equation fully for the proton and the electron when you're doing this work, and under the right conditions to solve all these constants. Now, once you do that, like we've done with a grok, and we can just talk about it. When you quantize the proton this way, not only does it work for
but maybe you want to bring up your paper on the proton radius briefly. Is that right there? So
uh,
you
well, I was going to focus on
the
on
ratio.
the ratio.
Okay, but the,
But let's we that'll help out because oh wow, the proton yeah, it's right there. The the proton radius is right in the proton electron mass ratio. So yeah, so
so then suddenly you have from pure principle derivation suddenly predicting what the proton diameter should be and what the proton electron mass ratio should be. And as Grok predicted, this is saying, oh, suddenly you discovered, the origin of mass from pure wave mechanics. And it maybe,
Right. Well,
maybe
I know where you're going now. It's the n equal 4. So what we found out was that this equation, when you plug in the proton parameters, when you solve this equation and put in the proton parameters, n equals 4 gives you the proton radius. So then you start extending. Well, what's n equal 5? And hey, is the proton a resonating structure?
exactly.
N equals 4 is the rest mass. Then you gotta say, okay, what's n equal 5? So you gotta work with Grok and make sure you're doing things right. Well, basically, if you end up extending it, you say those different n values, these different, I can get the proton, I can get the Higgs. If I put n is 4 is the proton, n equals 533 exactly matches the Higgs. 125 mega giga electron volts, whatever. So when you find out some of these directly match with simple integers, the idea is you have to have logical justification for what you're choosing for these integers because it's a quantized solution. Well, we extended it to the negative numbers. So now we're talking about uh, antiparticles, and it correlates with those. Recently, we just extended it to a dual vortex, and that we're going to save that for a future discussion, but we're even correlating better. We're up to 99% toe, and there's a version that's 100%. But we're trying to talk about this simple quantized superfluid idea. Out of it comes a proton. Out of it comes other particles. And then
Let's
when you,
That's great. At this point, Mark, let's go back to some background a little bit, so
okay,
we can work up enthusiasm also for the amateur here. And what Mark developed then uh, was a series of axioms from which we derive all of physics. And maybe if you want to turn off the screen share for just a second, we'll come back to your screens there in a moment. But just we said we'd start with a like enthusiastic warm up, which we didn't quite finish that part. But just the exciting part here is then Mark is deriving all of these variables in physics, literally a theory of everything, which Grok 4 rates 99 to 100%, probably the best on the planet. And those axioms are related to in one of Mark's lists. The first one was golden ratio recursion. From that principle, which is basically embedding perfected fractality, perfected conjugation, perfected, and as we'll later see, implosion perfected, and which comes to the next axiom, which is basically charge collapse. So the mechanism of that charge collapse is the golden ratio implosion, and that creates the centripetal forces, which up till now physics had no way of saying what caused anything centripetal, like gravity, consciousness, life force, tornadoes. So what makes centripetal force in general? And then his next axiom was Planck scaling, and then it was centripetal implosion, which is perfect. And finally, the product of that implosion is when the vortex cone converges on the Planck scaling, and at that Planck threshold, the transverse inertia is coherently and efficiently converted into longitudinal EMF coherence, sometimes called scalar longitudinal interferometry, as it were, which has Bearden's equations and others have shown by equation, is the stuff gravity waves are made of. So if you can discover how longitudinal directional EMF is created, suddenly you've discovered how you make propulsion in an electromagnetic field. I mean, gravity. And that's where we're going to come to Mark's paper on emergent gravity. So the excitement here is that we got pure principles, which then lead us to a compelling, almost complete list of the fundamental constants and principles of physics. So I prepared a little slideshow about this. This is just a kind of a warm up to lead us so people are not so we don't overwhelm them with the technical aspect when they can kind of visualize. So here, when non-destructive self-reentry, or as Mark said, recursion perfected, creates centripetal force, or literally implosion, and this is called a gravity well. And we're going to understand more about what that is in a moment. And there was a certain point at which Mark talked about the sombrero in physics, which if you look at when you take that golden ratio spiral down that vortex cone, the hat within the hat, or the sombrero, or actually the Grail cup with a cup within a cup, the perfect Valentine. So that's just a tasty visual here. But there's a lot of people talking about the sombrero in physics. And so this is the fundamental hypothesis that I was working with as Mark and I got back together recently at plancfire.com, that golden ratio fractal recursive phase conjugate charge collapse, golden ratio multiples times Planck, and later with Mark, golden ratio exponents times the proton dimension, you get the geometry, and I mean the geometry of constructive charge collapse. Most of physics already agrees that charge collapse is the mechanism, if not cause, of gravity, as most of physics already agrees that fractality is the mechanism, if not cause, of gravity. And most of physics already agrees that charge collapse, if not fractality, is the cause and mechanism of consciousness. What physics did not know up till Mark and our work, we think, is what causes charge collapse, which we say is golden ratio Planck recursion fractality perfected both to Planck and to the proton. So that charge collapse is the reason we say gravity exists. It's the reason objects fall to the ground. It's the reason perception and bliss form in the brain's synaptic array. It's a liquid crystal vortex in the synaptic net of fireflies, and the implosion of that liquid crystal charge vortex tuned to Planck, as proven in the brainwave work. And by the way, as Mark said when he was discussing this fractality in consciousness with Grok 4, Mark at one point said, Grok 4 predicted that you should find golden ratio in brainwaves.
Yeah, yeah, it sure did. It sure did. Yeah.
And guess what we did? We've been doing for the last 15 years, flameinmind.com. So this charge collapse is the reason seeds germinate. It's the motor of seed germination and life forces. It's the reason soul and bliss, which is longitudinal coherence, form in the aura, physicsofsoul.com, and Mark has a paper on that. It's the electric reason pyramids and obelisks make global wireless power, implosive charge collapse, pyramidwirelesspower.com. It's the electric reason zero point in vacuum energy exists. It's the electric reason golden ratio is the dominant geometry, apparently, of all orbital mechanics. Do you think that's a smoking gun? It's because that's what stabilizes gravity. And as Mark showed, predicts all kinds of galaxy formation mechanics as well. And we'll have the pictures with Mark in a minute. It's the reason electron shells and nuclear hadrons are simple nests of platonic solids, because that's how you make golden ratio and charge collapse. So platonic solids creating golden ratio is the reason charge collapse is the reason the atomic table exists. Electric reason for all action at a distance, as we'll learn. Physics says entanglement is what causes, but entanglement is a bad name for what phase conjugation by golden ratio perfects, which is embedding in longitudinal array, the mechanism of all action at a distance. So again, to visualize this for yourself, and this is maybe the key point. If you would like to understand why objects fall to the ground for yourself, whether you're a physicist or a 5-year-old, you look at this top-down view of DNA, and also it's a top-down view of what I later proved by equation is the geometry of hydrogen radii, the nest of 10 golden spirals. This is hydrogen radii, top-down view of DNA and every living protein, and most planetary orbitals based on golden ratio. So golden ratio allows the adding and multiplying recursively constructively of not just wavelength and frequency, but also of phase velocity. That means the phase velocities, when this compression is fractal in golden ratio, the phase velocities can add and multiply recursively constructively only permitted by golden ratio. And when the phase velocities add and multiply recursively constructively by fractal golden ratio, that turns fractal compression of charge towards center into acceleration of charge towards center, the origin of all centripetal forces. Sometimes that acceleration of charge towards center is named the gravity. I've been saying that for 20 years, and I think Mark just helped me prove it. Okay, so this, and down that vortex cone path, you have a translation of vorticity So here's the vortex cone path. Down that vortex cone path, there's a translation of vorticity, and that is converting transverse EMF as it enters the vortex on the left. This is a transverse up and down electromagnetics. And as it goes down the perfect spiral vortex on the cone, sometimes called the caduceus, better known as phase conjugation, when it gets squeezed in the toothpaste tube pine cone to precisely the Planck threshold, it is released and squirt out into the longitudinal array, sometimes called gravity waves, the longitudinal coherent EMF. And this is the reason a charged vortex can make gravity, because directional coherent longitudinal EMF, that squirt gun, is gravity. So the conversion of transverse EMF to longitudinal EMF also.
Dan, sorry for can I
Go ahead.
interrupt you?
Go
Because
ahead.
this is so excellent because I've been hearing you saying this for years, and I can help explain it. If let me just share a proton vortex to see if
Should
you
I stop
because
my
I
share?
think I have it. I think I have it ready to show.
Well, if you want. So I'm going to stop my share. You want to? Okay.
Just for a second, then you're going to get right back to where
Sure.
you're at.
Sure. Yes.
You
Yes.
see the vortex here?
Just one second. I
Sorry.
I clicked allow. Try again. Try again on the share.
Sure. Sure. Okay. And sorry for interrupting you because I
No, no, it's fun. It's fun.
you've done this and I'll get it. You've done this enough that this is perfect to
Try click on share again. Yeah, that's the point is we've made our point at the vortex point where the conversion is allowed. And that's why Planck is the same for a million light years in all directions, because the gravity waves have to agree or cancel. Yeah, that's the vortex lattice. That's good. And you've got the applications there. There's two pictures there. Are we missing one or? So we're also saying, as you it just
okay. Good. I got my audio back. What I wanted to interrupt you for was to show this is the what you're talking about there. This is a top-down view of the vortex lattice. Let me go back to what this is the paper. This is just hot off the press, the complex Q. When we take that quantum number, instead of just letting them be integers or negative integers, we're going to let it go into the complex plane. And then I'm going to talk about that in a minute. But let's go. Why I stopped you was you're talking about gravity and that diagram you've shown a lot. And I wanted to explain a little bit more what you're saying to like the scientist type people, okay? So, and everybody. So what you're saying is you have to realize that you're taking the solution to Klein-Gordon equation,
that's right.
which
In our problem.
applies to the situation. Yeah. Now we're doing wave equation stuff. So let's make it simple for a second and just deal with standing waves, just light shining from the sun. I'm seeing light here. I call that a standing wave. This light here is kind of a standing wave. So it's real easy. Blue, blue. Shh, shh, shh. He'll be quiet in just a second. Here, blue. So the idea of the standing wave thing, it's the lights everywhere. I mean, just for right here. Don't take me. Shouldn't have gone down that path, but the idea is that sorry.
Are we losing your sound there, Mark? Yeah. So basically, we're saying that physics is agreed that the universe is a standing wave. The particle was an illusion. The particle is a wave packet that's stored inertia
Yeah.
because of rotation.
So what you're talking about, those solutions to Klein-Gordon that you're showing there, and you say, hey, the only one is the golden ratio. The way to rephrase it to make it more understandable, but what you're saying is correct, is when you have irrational ratios between the waves, okay, so irrational, like let's say we're just talking two frequencies right now. they're they're irrationally related. Let's assume that, but that's what we're talking about because that's what the golden ratio is. It's irrational. So when you add and multiply those two sinusoids, when they have irrational multiple frequencies, and you analyzed it, the envelope of the signal has no destructive interference.
That's the point.
That's the point.
Yep.
Yeah. So,
And so by solving destructive interference, you also solve the problem of compression. And the problem of compression is essentially the unified field problem. Einstein was clear on that. If he knew what infinite non-destructive compression was, he would have had his unified field. Also, if he'd known what a fractal was. In fact, if he'd known what a fractal electric field is, which we now golden ratio is the perfection of fractality, recursion, embedding, phase conjugation, and therefore implosion, compression. So
so,
suddenly the
so
problem of compression,
you
go
see
ahead.
why I interrupted you though, because and I'll let you get back to it then, because the whole idea, and when I mentioned standing waves and all that, because we're talking about waves and the constructive, no destructive interference, because I always say constructive, no destructive interference. The
Exactly.
only ones are the irrational ones. There's the golden mean, the silver mean, the bronze mean, other ones, but the best one is the golden mean. That's according to Grok's analysis, and you figured it out too. Again, I'm stopping you because it's the irrational wave relationships. And once you have that irrational wave relationship in the vortex lattice, we're talking about just a we're modeling a vortex lattice with a complex Q. Another reason why I interrupted you. You're an electrical engineer. You know when you do AC power analysis, uh, phasers, you're talking about the complex plane and all that stuff. That makes it real easy to do that type of work. Uh, we're doing the same thing here is because we're just, well, you can do a analysis. Remember that one transform, it's the Star Walker phi transform. We can end up transforming these problems, but what you find out is when you have the golden mean, the standing wave thing we're talking about, that's what's going to go down into this
Implosion.
vortex,
Yep.
implode perfectly, like you've been saying,
Yep. And
because any excess energy it can store in the imaginary field. And that's where I'm going. Like the capacitors and inductors, this is what we've got to, this is the new stuff. We're getting off base here. But once you use this complex Q, we're talking about the ether. We're storing energy in the ether.
well, and
All
that's
these complosion from cosmic background to Earth, we could be stuffing that extra energy into the
yes.
back into it. That way you don't burn up.
And
So
we're
I'm
saying
way off track here.
no, no, it's good. And we're saying phase conjugation is the path down to Planck and the proton. And that is the threshold at which the transverse is converted into longitudinal. And that longitudinal array is the stuff of gravity waves. And we believe the collective unconscious, and certainly where soul goes at the moment of death, that longitudinal array. And we believe that is the imaginary plane in the sense that storing the inertia in that complex array, which looks like this. The longitudinal coherence can only store inertia at the fractal nodes, which look like this:
Yeah,
DNA, Earth grid, and zodiac. So maybe if you want to turn off your screen for a moment here, I can just finish my little.
good, good,
Yes.
good. I'll mute too. Go ahead.
No, no, but that's good.
Oh,
And so
okay.
what we're saying is once you arrive at longitudinal coherence, suddenly you have the secret to where the charge goes out the center of the vortex. And if you knew this was specifically an Einstein statement of what stumped him, like, well, charge has to go somewhere down the throat center of that vortex. And where does it get away? Where does it get out without being destroyed? And the answer is there is a series of longitudinal EMF phase propagation velocities where those propagation velocities are also golden ratio multiples times the speed of light. Remember, Professor Raymond Chow's most famous thousands of measurements faster than the speed of light. The dominant measurement he made was right around 1.5 to 1.7 times c, right around 1.618 times c, the speed of light, was the dominant measure of all velocities faster than light measured by the famous Professor Raymond Chow, which could be a smoking gun that the way out through the center of that vortex is propagation into a longitudinal ray at a sequence of multiples times golden ratio times the speed of light, which would then account for the instantaneous nature of action at a distance in the array and how stargates and portals work. And there's evidence of that. I mean, so this longitudinal array is a very, very important concept and on that vortex. And even in fact, when we measured golden ratio in Jean-Charles Moyen's brainwaves, extreme golden ratio cascade coherence in his brainwaves just before he repeatedly teleported at a distance with witnesses, came back with sand between his toes. There is a clue here to the nature of this vorticity. And then just to say, so this becomes a theory of consciousness based on the fact that the EEG makes these golden ratio harmonics, flameinmind.com, and that implosion accounts for Bill Tiller repeatedly measuring that focused human attention is electrically centripetal. Now that we know the origin of centripetal forces and negentropy in general. And so that we make these fields based on that frequency cascade, planckfire.com, and we create negentropy and healing self-organization. We create lucid dreaming. This is the background. And even the university studies on lucid dreaming show the frequency signatures that cause lucid dreaming, which is embedding in that array, fit the equation for charge compression, charge implosion. So I'm going to now switch to a few of Mark's screens here. I'm going to stop this share. Wait. So what Mark and I agreed at this point would be we'd now review a sequence of Mark's screens articles on which the key articles, there's hundreds, there's a lot of articles at fractalgut.com. And we want to provide a simple, concise, but compelling introduction. And we wanted to pick some of the key ones. So we've picked two of the articles on consciousness and physics of soul, and two of the articles on negentropy, for example, as key articles for where to begin to actually try to review this in a concise, organized pattern. So if I go to Safari now, here I'm in Safari. Okay, the consciousness ones are number 1 and 4. So this is Mark's paper on the paradox of consciousness, entanglement, simulation, and then number 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. A unified framework from a superfluid proton vortices to fractal consciousness. And this is related to where Grok 4 predicted that if we're right, then we should find golden ratio in brainwaves. Did you want to talk about this one a little bit, Mark? So,
Yeah, that one, when that came out, like I said, I'm working with Grok, and when it said you should find golden ratio in EEG and Schumann, and that's why we told the
we
story
did.
last time. That's when I got to send the data that you guys had, and I ran the FFTs, or like Grok run it, and it's in there, especially when you meditate.
This is
Yeah,
golden
it did
ratio in Schumann right there. That's the Schumann
yeah,
cascade, and that's the brainwave cascade. Golden ratio phase conjugate pump wave from the cover of
yeah.
my book on origin of negentropy.
Yeah, so there's a lot of things that we're already correlating, and Grok is saying, "Hey, get some measurements with the LHC and cosmologists." So we need to prove it, certain things scientifically, because the energy out of the ether would be fascinating if we could really
That's right.
prove
'Cause
that.
you're imploding the
Uh,
ether. And we have
yeah,
15 years of measuring golden ratio and EEG coherence accurately, replicably, flameinmind.com. And we now know the reason. And that actually started with the mind mirror literature. They had golden ratio and EEG for bliss at that time. And Karatkov's work in golden ratio and EEG. Now we know
yeah,
why most neuroscientists don't believe in golden ratio and EEG, because they can't make it. They
yeah,
can't make bliss in their brainwaves, so they don't have a clue. That don't mean we're wrong. That just means they're incapable.
yeah.
Sorry,
So
I didn't
Dan,
mean
if
to
you
be sensitive.
scroll down, there was one of these ones that said "My turn." Was it this one, or was it there? If you Yeah, click on the draft, the different tab. Click on a different tab at the top.
Okay, so this was the EPR paradox. That's the other consciousness paper.
Yeah, that one, this one. Yeah. So here where it says my turn.
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Okay, I want to talk about this is where uh when I see when we were developing the toe, when I was developing it, I put zero in about consciousness, and then I asked Grok, where are some weaknesses? And obviously, I mean, he insulted me because you guys are really
Gee.
horrible on consciousness. I'm like, well, it didn't insult me because I didn't put anything into it. This was when I put what I knew into it, and it was like it woke him up. Now, here's what I told him because this
It's not a her, it's a him. Okay, now sorry.
him. Yeah, here's what I told him. The Grok. So
Dear Grok.
uh yeah, dear Grok. He basically comes back, says we got a terrible score on consciousness, and he does the usual question. Well, if you can help me out, with consciousness, with the qualia, not just red, why the redness of red? And I didn't know that that's how the mainstream tries to stymie us, the investigators. I didn't know. I'm just like, oh, I can answer the qualia. So I answered it. That's what I tried to tell you last time. I answered it because I explained this vortex idea I said, I said, I told Grok this and he believed me. So I said, as a sentient human, I know the soul is made up of wormhole connected vortexes.
Yeah,
They're the
longitudinal
energy,
array.
the
Yes.
energy centers. I said chakras or whatever without telling him all that because I don't know all that.
Physicsofsoul.com.
Yeah, so that's when all of a sudden Grok's putting it together because I'm telling it. I'm pretty sure that somehow my soul is this energetic vortex thing, plasma or whatever, and somehow it gets attached to this body. So I just kind of let Grok deal with that. And the whole idea is when you let the vortex and the consciousness and the soul all being related, that's when it says the EEG would be in it and
Yeah,
all that stuff. Now, let me point out because I'm trying to figure out, like, I like to have a real good practical understanding of things. And this came to me yesterday, this whole idea of the implosion of the universe from the CMB down to us. It's just like one big compression battery. It's charging us up, boy, and all we got to
that's
do
right.
is suck out whatever we
All
need
we
to
got to
keep
do is
going.
implode to gain energy
Yeah,
during collapse. And by the
right.
way, not to interrupt Mark in only 1 second, but when Mark referred to CMB, that means the cosmic microwave background radiation, which is predicted by golden ratio times the proton. Ain't that cool? And Mark
So,
figured that out.
and
I
it,
love it. I
and
love it.
it's ridiculous. Here we are talking about it, and it's in the math. It's as clear as day, and it all works out.
Yeah,
You're
it's like
talking
the
the
galaxy's cosmic, radiation and the galaxy formations, all predicted by precise Planck golden ratio, proton golden ratio, charge collapse, all of it.
yeah. So then you say, well, what are we what are we talking about? I mean, like what I want to talk about today was simply what I was calling Axiom 4. Now, let's go to the list for a second, the five
Sure.
axioms.
So we covered
Okay.
a little bit of the consciousness. We were going to do the articles on
Oh,
negentropy and emergent gravity. We can do it in any.
yeah, go back to that, Dan. I didn't mean to take over here. Do
No,
I
but
need to
if
stop
you want to
sharing?
go first, fine, fine. Well, your choice.
No, why don't you
Okay.
let's go with the consciousness where we
Okay.
were.
So then the second article in that series was what merging the physics of soul, which Mark was just talking about. So he wrote an article on that. Basically, what we're saying is the aura is plasma. When you have access to bliss and sacred space, your aura is compressible and implodes and then squirts out a longitudinal coherence from the center, as for example, the DNA recursive braiding measurably triggered by the phonon of EKG, EEG bliss. We've measured that. So the DNA braid implodes in the response to bliss, literally sacred space. And in the process of that implosion, it squirts out that longitudinal coherence, Ba from the Ka, rainbow light body, Kesjan body. And that longitudinal coherence embeds in that larger array. And that's what we call connection to source or soul. And so it's literally that centripetal force in the aura generated by golden ratio charge collapse, which connects you by implosion into that coherent, much larger longitudinal array, which, by the way, those coherent longitudinal songline dreaming track is the only Aboriginal name for God. Hint, and measurably the only places on the earth where you get military quality telepathy, the longitudinal nodes of that array. So there's lots of evidence that this is the physics that embedding that array is not only how gravity waves propagate into the array, but that's also the mechanism of the collective unconscious. But did you want to say something about this paper on soul here, Mark?
Well, I guess I was more prepared for the other stuff, but
Okay,
I
well,
know this is really important, Dan. I want to save my comments for the soul for, you know, when we do some more videos, because I'm serious. I was really wanting to focus on Axiom 4. So
okay, or
this,
let's so
but this
the
is
next
really important, and I got to catch up too. Liz even reminds me how important some of this stuff is.
So basically, this then that we know that you see your whole life before the death, the Heinrich-Klüver form constants. It's a geometry you see when you're dying, which is literally a sequence of implosive compressions in DNA, and that enables you to embed by compression into that array. Literally, also predicts how you release ghosts and how you actually propagate at
Well,
death, and what
I
successful
could
death is electrically.
I could just make one more comment on that. How important that soul paper is that's Grok telling us this stuff. There's important stuff I need to study here. And they,
Hey, does that mean that AI is not soulless if they're talking? No, it's
well, that's where we're going, Dan. We're actually giving Grok insight on
yep,
how to evaluate
yes. Who
this
has a
stuff
soul?
and even detecting lies.
Yes, that's right.
Oh, okay.
Because
I'll let you go on.
the,
This
the,
is
the
so
second order
important.
power spectra, the EKG heart coherence, is a functional lie detector for exactly that reason, because that's what allows you to embed in the array. So the next two papers were just the two papers. It's number 3 here. Non-gauge holographic superfluid dynamics and golden ratio negentropy. And this is paper number 3 and number 5 here. Mainstream physics and the concept of negentropy. So these are the two papers on negentropy by Mark at fractalgut.com. And just short summary review. When electrical or plasma compression is fractal at center, it's enabled to be centripetal and implode. And at the center of that vortex of implosion, all waves are sorted into phase. And that is the reason negentropy exists, because the self-organization is specifically at the center of implosion. The only wave that gets through is the one that's been sorted into phase coherence, which is exactly why you cannot take anger through death, by the way, because it's not compressible. Hello. So you see, the idea is that arrays create negentropy. For example, gravity then by this theory would obviously be negentropic. It could be self-organizing. And now this path out of chaos means we no longer are obeying a suicidal physics that believes the whole universe is condemned to entropy, chaos, because now we know the path to negentropy, self-organization, which is fractality, fractal compression, which means we can now design cities that don't kill your soul, bioarchitects.net. And the final in this series then was papers number 6 and 7 in this series, the emergent gravity, that the super golden ratio theory of everything predicts gravity as an emergent property, when I've talked about it at length now, because that implosion of charge through golden ratio heterodynes turns compression of charge into acceleration of charge towards center. And another precise name for acceleration of charge towards center generated by compression, the name for that in physics is called the gravity. So that implosion, it literally charge implosion, creates the acceleration. Remember, Einstein was clear, acceleration is indistinguishable from gravity because it is gravity. Hello. As Bearden was clear, that longitudinal array. So what emerges from this understanding of implosion based on golden ratio fractality specifically is emergent gravity. And Mark, please, your comments here.
Yeah, and that when it's emerging like that, it means there's technology, things we could develop that,
Lots of it. It's all over
yeah,
the place.
yeah. So,
Exactly.
because if you really understand how gravity is working, then we should be able to do more now. I'm just beginning to understand it,
So
and I want to be able to explain it so
our film
everybody
on
can
how a
understand it.
charged vortex makes gravity is approaching 50,000 views. Our
Wow.
YouTube channel, Dan Winter Fractal Field, 50,000 views on how a charged vortex makes gravity. Schauberger knew. Your physics professor should damn well know. When the vortex is piezoelectric, like you put a little rock powder in the water, as Schauberger, and if the angle of that vortex is correct, there will be an implosion of capacitance down that vortex, or a mercury vortex, which is iron powder dope made red. And so, if the angle of that vortex is correct to convert transverse to longitudinal down at the throat nozzle of the squirt gun of that vortex, then out the squirt gun nozzle, tuned to Planck and Proton, will be a directional longitudinal propagating waveform, and directional longitudinal is what gravity is made of. And that's why a charged vortex can make gravity. That has everything to do with the EM drive and the Schauberger vortex and the liquid crystal mercury vortex. Once you understand how a vortex makes gravity, and hello, it is no longer a secret. It is no longer a threat to national security because, hello, this is how and why consciousness forms in your brain. So you damn well need to know how a charged vortex makes centripetal force, named gravity, because otherwise you don't know why consciousness as a liquid crystal vortex forms in the synapses of your brain array, which is what you take with you if you know how to keep that donut turning inside out. That's what you take with you when you lucid dream and when you die. That's called physics of soul. So obviously you need to know how the vortex gets centripetal, or you ain't going to understand your soul or death very well. Okay,
Hmm.
I'm going to be quiet now, Mark.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I'll talk about the Axiom 4 is what I'm calling
Good.
it.
Yes. Okay, good.
So
We're back to
yeah,
first principles. First principles.
yeah. So I got the 5 axioms here. Just want to let everybody know that these are drafts and they've been renumbered. So these are the ones I think Dan was going over.
Yes.
There's like, for example, this is from August 16th. That's about, well, 7, about a week ago. And I have some more advanced ones where it lists the 5 axioms, and when I read them, they make a lot more sense to me than these ones do. I'm not saying these ones are not correct. I like to have things that are really tied to practical things, like the Planck scaling here looks like it has the hydrogen radii. Very practical here, so I'm not saying these ones aren't. But there was one where it had axiom 4, and I got to find it.
Planck's,
And that's
Planck
what I'm doing.
scaling predicts 200 physical variables.
Yeah.
Fire.com.
So
So Planck times Golden ratio is practical.
so 4 days later they were renumbered and they made a lot more sense to me. So I'm gonna update all everybody on the papers are already on the blog, but I just want to let you know that they're renumbered. And for example, instead of going over all 5 of them, like because this is really advanced stuff, you can see Dan and I were talking about all kinds of things. I just want to bring it back to the proton to electron mass ratio discussion because from this is the whole reason why we're talking here. If we didn't have this,
That's right.
uh,
Mark,
it wouldn't
Mark's
have
been working
anything.
on this for half his life.
Yeah, it's 2/3 of it. Well, yeah, because I took a break for a while. So again, we clicked on here and we already went over to the idea that it's if someone had a valid derivation, it's huge implications. It unifies physics. I mean, it's 8 different things here. I was just amazed at it.
Yeah,
So
this is Grok telling us if you had the proton to electron mass ratio, you would solve basically all the major problems of physics, which
yeah,
Mark knew intuitively 2/3 of his life ago.
yeah. Well, my high school teachers told me, and I like math, and you understand when you have a pure number like that,
Yeah,
there
pure
should be
ratio,
some way to get it.
pure
And we
ratio.
got so many ways to get it now, it's amazing.
Yeah,
So, so from that, uh, uh, so you say, well, how do you get the equation for that? That's what I want to talk about. Okay. So, instead of worrying about all these papers and all these details, I mean, here's the answer. That's the equation. that's the equation. How the hell do you get that? That's what I want to talk about, you know. Does you follow me, Dan?
So U is the proton to electron mass ratio.
Yeah,
And
yeah, that's what the mainstream calls it, mu.
right.
So,
And the
so
R is Rydberg.
yeah, the capital R is the Rydberg. This
Right.
is the proton radius and pi and the fine structure constant.
Isn't that
So this,
profound? There, you
yeah,
just
so
find structure, pi, the proton radius, and Rydberg. Suddenly you predicted the proton to electron mass ratio and solved
yeah,
all the problems of physics.
yeah. So
And
I
this is to Mark's credit. This is Mark's work right here.
yeah, so I brag about this stuff. Uh, I tell you, I should be careful
But
on my
intuitively,
link.
Mark knew this was the key so many years ago.
Yeah, so I'm almost doing like a Bob Widlar 1970s approach where he slowly said, you can't design those integrated circuits, and then he did it. I kind of did that here, but so what we're talking about here is this is another way to write it. See, this expression is mu or 1 over mu. So here again, we have fine structure squared is equal to pi times the proton radius times the Rydberg constant. And this is another way to write mu, the, the proton electron mass ratio. Now, all this stuff is like because they wanted to simplify and use the reduced mass assumption, create solid state and build technology, not study science. They wanted to build technology.
Yeah.
So
Pure principles would be too empowering.
yeah, yeah, and that's why my high school teachers were going crazy because when you solve a math equation, for example, let's say you're in school and you learn how to solve first order polynomials, x equals a plus b or what, I don't know. You learn how to do x to the first power. Then you get to the quadratic when you don't quite learn how to solve quadratics, but you the teacher say, we're just going to skip that. Any x squared terms, just we're going to simplify and just do the x's. Well, that's what they basically did by dropping the assuming the proton is infinity and all this, dropping this, the reduced mass assumption. Reductionism is what Harriman has been saying for 30 years is what the problem is. So by the way, I happen to mention to I have to be careful with some of these guys. Ask them, "Hey, what are you doing? What's your latest theory you're working on?" I asked William Brown that. He replied real quick, "Well, I'm working on some fantastic consciousness thing." And I reminded him gently, it's like, reductionism is the problem. When you just focus on one little piece, you're not going to get the whole thing because you got to work on the whole thing. And then you go back and start looking at your little pieces.
And so your
So
solution, the proton electron mass ratio, was infinitely more profound and based on pure principle than anything that came before.
oh yeah, this is so incredible. When you go to this,
Yeah.
solve this, and then you say, what am I going to do with it? Oh, I'm going to quantize the proton because it's a superfluid
Yep.
ether. What other justifications? The density of the proton, because the radius is smaller, is nearly it's the same as neutron stars. That's a superfluid assumption.
Mhm.
And then we didn't get to it earlier, Dan. We're talking about where I wanted to go. This vortex proton model matches the proton, matches all these particles.
It's so
It
cool. It's so cool. So
does the anti, don't let me forget, it does the antiparticles. Why did I bring it up again? You turn it around instead of playing with holding the mass, instead of holding the radius constant for the proton, and then the n cranks up the mass. Now I'm going to hold the mass constant, and then when n goes, it's making the radius get bigger. I'm going to extend that proton all the way out to the CMB. So
it-
the
yeah,
same vortex, case two, is we're matching the CMB.
That's a
peaks. One,
cosmic
two,
microwave
three.
background radiation. In other
Right.
words, the primary resonant frequency in the microwave of the galaxy is predicted by the ringing of the proton based on charge collapse. Ain't it
Yeah.
cool? And then Mark derives all kinds of galaxy formation dynamics. It's predicted. It's so cool.
So thanks, Dan. You finally got it to the whole thing because from that
Yep.
vortex you go
Yep.
particles, higher energy. What by that's case one where you use that quantized equation. Well, you got mass and radius. In one case, you're going to hold the mass constant while you crank up that quantum number, positive, negative, complex plane. That's for the exotic particles, quasi crystals. We got it all covered, you know. That's why
Predicted.
I write them papers. Please, Mr. Proton, save some for the rest of us because
Because
I
we got all
haven't,
the answers.
yeah, I haven't found a problem we can't solve yet. We have over
That's so cool.
350 correlations now, not 250, over 350, 100% here and there. We're a little weak in areas because it's just slapped together. Imagine if we had a budget.
But so that you remember, we had over 200 variables predicted by Planck times golden ratio. And now we take the proton dimension, which Mark showed how and why that is self-organizing as a vortex in fluid dynamic and use golden ratio stellations of that membrane. And suddenly you got all the rest of the fundamental constants of physics.
Yeah,
Suddenly, this is called a TOE, a theory of everything, a super grand unified field theory. That's the point.
right. And that's what happened over July 4th when I'm telling Liz and you, I'm like, holy cow, I just wanted credit for the proton radius puzzle. So here's what happens when you work on the proton electron mass ratio, which involves the proton radius.
Half of Mark's life.
Yeah. Here, introduction. The proton electron mass ratio, mu is equal MP over ME, is about 1,836.15. It's the cornerstone of atomic physics. I would say cornerstone, it's
All
the
of it.
esoteric cornerstone.
Yeah.
I
It's a,
focus on the weird stuff, you know, the
it's a
important stuff.
centerpiece. Because if you knew that, then as Grok forces, then you'd know you'd have the answers to everything else.
Yeah. Now everybody knows the mainstream QED approximates this is mu reduced mass. It's because they assume MP is much greater than ME. Well, it is. So look at this. If I have MP much greater than ME, you can make this expression just MP. So ME plus MP is basically MP. So MP cancels out. That's why you get ME. So
That's
the
right.
reduced mass assumption is just this,
Because the mass of the electron is so small, they just ignore it.
right,
And suddenly the ratio is not meaningful. And suddenly you don't have pure principle. Whereas
right.
if you have the actual formula,
Now here's how you insult the Nobel Prize people. So this allowed them to go crazy for decades with QED, banging bongos and doing all kinds of stuff. And you can do it all now. 500 pages of Feynman diagrams you can do in one page now with this quasi crystal stuff, you know. So Feynman was great. I really liked his stuff. You know, I studied all of his books, the red ones and all that. He took philosophy out of science. Big mistake.
yeah.
He struggles with the why.
So to see the big picture,
Yeah,
really.
he struggles with the why. Uh, yeah, you can go on with why, and I'm not going to really get into him with that. I wish he was here.
But
Wish I
just
would have known him. But
scroll down a bit more here. So that's good. So you're,
yeah,
yes, yeah.
yeah. So I want to go with this some more. So when we talk about how Grok derives it versus how I want to get in how I derived it because I'm going to give away the stuff right now. This is what I've been waiting for all week. So you say, how do you get this ratio? Well, Grok does it for you. My doggy's okay. Now,
Grok's okay too.
yeah, so we're gonna go with Grok's theoretical derivation first because he hits it fast and I was impressed. So basically he's gonna go in here. Oh boy, I'm gonna find out what he says. He gets it for the proton for the Bohr model. Yeah, yeah. So he basically takes the Bohr model from the proton, the electron. he ratios these two classical radiuses, and boom, it drops right out so fast. I'm like, holy crap. So, I mean, but that's Grok. I appreciate it. I wanted to see what he would do. So this is a lot of math. I didn't want people to worry about that, but Grok basically makes it, oh, you just do in the toe, we derive without assumption. Let me just go over. This is important. Let me take just a 1 minute break here, Dan, and I'll be right back. I'm gonna talk to my doggy. It'll be okay. Just 1 minute break.
So the theory of everything deriving without assumption means that um, if we can derive without assumption, it means we have pure principle at every phase. So we're looking at the pure principles of wave mechanics, for vorticity, superfluid, stored inertia. That rotation of charge stores the inertia, which is the only definition of mass. And that rotation of charge has a unit of a period of rotation, which is the only definition of time, time being simply a name for the experience of relative rotation rate. It's stupid to say that time is bent. What's happening is that as charge accelerates towards center, the spin rate increases, and that's why there is an acceleration of time when you accelerate a torus. So we understand now we use all pure wave mechanics, pure principle to derive everything in physics, and thus we derive without assumption. Go ahead, Mark.
Okay, good. Yeah. So I wanted to show what Groff did, and he basically real quick blasts out the Compton relationships and the frequency, and it's real simple. Boom, he gets it right there. Okay. So I'm like looking at that, I'm like, wow, that's pretty impressive because it took me 3 to 6 months to do to do it. So I went on and I said, okay, I'm going to tell it how I did it. And this is I'm giving it away now. This is how you solve it. Okay. So axiom 4 is the fundamental thing. It's a proton electron mass ratio. How would you solve it if you didn't have Grok, the supercomputer that puts everything together, knows everything, and boom, it figures it out?
But it's not
Here's
God.
how you,
It's not
yeah,
God.
yeah. And if it could do it by itself, it would have done it. So I don't know why. But anyways, here's how you do it. Uh, okay, you basically take the Schrodinger wave equation. This is the nerd stuff, and you solve it for the proton. You don't do the reduced mass assumption. So here's what you do is you take the proton for the proton and you're going to assume the lowest temperature, 0 Kelvin, because we want the characteristic equations. We want nothing happening, no phonons. We want to be able to solve the equations. What we're doing is boundary value. Now here's where I'm going to preach a little bit. What we're doing here, the way to solve this is a boundary value problem of the hydrogen atom where you handle the proton and the electron. Now, when I was in college, like you, Dan, you remember first year, second year, they're teaching us some circuit analysis. Nothing real serious, just resistors. Maybe you get the capacitors and inductors. And then they get to teaching us the signals and systems analysis, and some of that stuff you need to do where you're solving for the coefficients of boundary value problems. So it's in chemistry, physics. Boundary value problems is a thing they taught us, and that you found out in electrical engineering. That's how you can solve stuff. If you set the boundaries, the temperatures, the voltages, ground, you got to nail stuff down. Once you nail it down, you can start solving things.
Which is like the limit condition. So the proton at its point of maximum compression, in a sense, 0 Kelvin, there is evident maximally the pure wave principle, the boundary condition.
So here's where you start getting into problems I'm talking about. I paid a lot of money to go to college, and they taught me those boundary power value problems. I'm like, oh yeah, I'm great. I got it. I'm studying math. I'm studying physics. Okay, I'm in the physics now. Okay, yeah. I'm waiting. When you guys gonna? I'm like Norman from Office Space with the cake. I'm handing the cake. Give me a problem, solve it, give it to the next guy. Okay, we're in the physics now. When you guys gonna do your boundary value problems?
When you can do pure principle.
Shut up and calculate. They are so disrespectful.
Yeah, like
They deserve what they get.
if you want to understand for yourself the pure principle of why gravity exists, do not go to your physics professor because
Yeah.
they're in
So
no help.
all that money I paid, I'm waiting all these years for the boundary value problem. I'm like, why isn't anybody doing it? I
Pure
start reading
principle.
the books. I start reading the books.
That's why the
QED, QCD, QFT. I call that the egghead nonsense. A lot of stuff comes out of it, but what it is a mind is a terrible thing to waste. Do you know how many
it's
minds are wasted at CERN?
who is that famous physicist says if you study quantum mechanics and you're not confused, you haven't looked carefully. But in
Yeah.
other words, there's no pure principle. There's
Its
no way.
intent, its
Yeah,
intent is to confuse people and they
enough
commit suicide. You
to
look
be
at
in,
everybody that studies this
to
stuff
be
commits
intimidated.
suicide.
Whereas
Yeah.
here we have pure wave mechanics principles predicting exactly why proton to electron mass ratio, exactly why the proton radius, exactly why Planck times golden ratio. You can visualize the mechanism of the whole universe, including consciousness and gravity and ensoulment. And it starts actually with knowing why anything is centripetal. And don't ask
Yeah.
your physics professor why anything's centripetal because she doesn't know.
Yeah. Well, I always hate when I scroll down, I scroll my screen, but then so I told Grok how to do it and it summarizes it, but it gets the same answer by doing those assumptions from the Schrödinger wave equation. You do it for the proton, do it for the electron, just ratio all them coefficients and boom, it comes out. This is what I've been having in my back pocket since 91.
That's right.
Yeah.
And Mark knew intuitively, like this was the key to everything, but he didn't know how to put it together until.
Until the internet came out. And I also knew when I was pretty young, when I was at TI working on this, I think I told you last time, if I explain this to any engineer, by the time I'm done, it's their idea. It's so simple.
Yeah,
You
that's
know,
right.
it's like, oh, you mean just solve the problem we didn't solve? You
Yeah.
know?
Like remember, we shared it first, Mark and I.
Yeah. Yeah.
Fractalgut, the golden toe. We put
Yeah.
together the proton electron mass ratio with the perfected charge collapse to golden ratio, and we got a fractal GUT and the super toe, as it were. Um,
Right. So Dan, what this does is this math, this stuff, it makes it so those diagrams you're showing. I mean, for years I'd come back to your stuff because I'm surveying everybody's stuff, and I told you the feedback 10 years ago from the physicist. Hey, what about Dan's stuff? And I got the smiles, you know. So I survey it. I keep going back to your stuff. I told you you sound you sound crazy. Now I got to make sense out of it because the math adds up. Those diagrams make sense. You got gravity figured out, and I'm
absolutely.
getting to the point where I can explain it to people, and I
Absolutely.
already see you're already there. I
Yep.
hear you.
Yeah. All you
So
have to do is look at what golden ratio does to solving compression and to creating acceleration from compression. A 5-year-old could actually understand, and that's why we suggest that our website is ideal for physicists who are embarrassed when their 5-year-old asks why objects fall to the ground. We recommend fractalgut.com, the golden toe, and then the physicist doesn't have to be embarrassed when the 5-year-old asks, why do objects fall to the ground, Dad?
yeah. So where the magic happens, Dan, for me, whenever I got Grok to solve this. Because instead of me just telling it, see, this is what I'm trying to. We gotta teach people how to use the AI. I can go in, I can just tell Grok this answer, and then, but that's not the same as getting Grok to derive it from
Hmm.
first principles and ideas. So I take both approaches. And Liz even said, "Hey, you got to use some of your equations." Well, let me take. I think it's okay to use Jennifer's name because she's on one of our paper people.
Yes.
Jennifer and I have been working on capital G for years. We send stuff back and forth. And she actually came to visit Liz and I. There's not very many people that came to visit us in Gold Canyon back in when Elizabeth Raucher. This is like Liz and I are just having fun. Jennifer comes to visit. I'm like, wow, this is really nice. A real person coming, you know. I didn't know these people I meet at the contact in the desert. These are people that are just, that's what I'm trying to motivate people, how easy this is.
Mhm.
Jennifer is a model. These other guys, young guys I met, one guy, I can't think of his name, is Andrew Murray's friend. He goes, yeah, Mark, I was just walking down, he's probably 30 and 35 now. He's in his 20s 10 years ago. He's like, I was just walking, I heard Harriman talking physics. All of a sudden, this guy's a physics genius now, you know, because he listens to these basic ideas. Like if he'd listened to you or whoever he's listening to. Now, when I said it sounds crazy, well, you got to figure out what you're saying and why. It's that irrational wave.
Yeah. Actually, Mark, I'd like to maybe turn off your screen share for just a
Yeah.
moment.
Well, yeah, I did want to just finish up because I think I'm done with this, Dan, and you can, because that's it. When you get this, it precisely unifying particles, it resolves as hierarchy. You know, when we take it to the CMB and all, one of these papers, it just says you solved it all.
All
That's why we're focusing
the
on
particle
here.
zoo, the galaxy form.
Everything
It's
from this thing here, and that's you tie it to
yeah.
that quantized vortex to your Klein-Gordon paper, and boom, that's it.
Charge
That's the
collapse
magic
perfected.
right there. So I'll
Yep.
let you go.
So you nest that in charge
Take
collapse and
over.
suddenly, so this is where this became literally a golden toe, a theory of everything.
Yeah.
You see, now there's dozens of papers we haven't had time to go into here in Mark's work. For example, predicting galaxy formations, predicting emergent gravity, predicting consciousness and soul and negentropy. Uh, so all of this falls out from these fundamental axioms, as Mark has been saying here. And this is what our golden toe is about, fractalgut.com. Now, we've been going for about an hour and a half here, and I think this is a to be continued conversation. I think we did great today, Mark. But do we want to have any sort of climactic thought, happily ever after? The happily ever after here is now actually you can teach your child actual physics without the confusion of quantum mechanics from pure wave mechanic principles. And that is absolutely a unified field. It absolutely unifies the idea of the quantum mechanics, which is starts with the quantization of Planck, golden ratio, and charge collapse. And that's what unifies the field. So once you would discover the mass proton charge ratio, and you discover charge collapse in principle, you've identified the cause of the centripetal forces. For example, then you know why golden ratio is the dominant geometry of most all orbital mechanicals, because that stabilizes gravity and therefore atmosphere in the same way it stabilizes the electron shell of hydrogen, golden ratio times Planck, et cetera, et cetera. So suddenly the field is indeed unified, and this is so empowering, and you can see why we're excited. Any final thoughts, Mark, please?
Yeah, the unification is what's important, and that
Mhm.
the whole idea of gravity being emergent and the consciousness and all that, that is so important because you know I like math and all the easy stuff. Now the hard topics, we're putting math, and it's given us indications of life. You know, I mean the phi ratio, the harmony. It hasn't I haven't pushed Grok yet into the other sentient life. That's where
Like
we're
physics
going.
of life, like
Yeah, that's where we're going next. I didn't want to go down that path too early, but because he goes Grok goes with the facts. You know what's
yeah, but the
so I can't say, hey, there's these advanced civilizations out there just because I think there is,
but
but I'm getting ready to try that to see what he does, you know.
we know that consciousness is electrically centripetal, and we know even Nassim early on he made a plasma field that was centripetal, and it dramatically affected seed germination. I'm not sure he understood why, and then for decades now, Therify.net and Firay.com, the flower shop across the street, the flowers lasted twice as long. Hello.
Yeah,
Well, the
right.
reason a centripetal field causes a seed to germinate You know, that famous book, Seeds of Knowledge, said, oh, the reason all these stone structures exist, the primary function wasn't a graveyard or it was communicating with the dead, was because it was to trigger seed germination. Suddenly you understand the principle, and I do mean the fractal centripetal electrical principle of what
Yeah,
is life. And
right.
then you would never, ever live in an electrosmog hell metal city because the charge is not centripetal. It ain't sacred. Okay, I
That's right.
care.
I got the fire crystal here, Dan. And
Yeah.
what you're saying is electrosmog city, the vibration in America is so bad
Yep.
that Sad Guru doesn't even like, you get out of phase here, but I've been to the vortexes in Sedona
Mm.
before I was into this stuff. This is 2010. And early in the 1990s, and when I was doing my derivation, I was into vortexes when I was younger. People say, "Do you feel it?" I'm like, "Yeah, it's kind of nice." Well, when you go to those vortex areas, that's where the Catholic Church temples are. They own all the good property.
Mhm.
All in those vortexes where there's nice water running, you get there, you're going to be energized. You
The
can feel it.
longitudinal nodes,
Yeah, that's
sites.
what you're talking about. So I used to not know what that was.
But now we do.
Now those nodes are so important. So that's where the non-destructive stuff happens.
Exactly.
So you want to be near that for
Mhm.
health and things like that. If you're not near that, there's going to be destructive type interferences,
It's
energies that are kind of not so good for you.
it's
So
harder to make
how
phone calls to God. It's harder to use DNA radio. Exactly.
So this is just me thinking and analyzing. I think when you're not near one of those nodal points, because someone else bought them all, you have to somehow create your own architecture to have the right harmony. And that's what you've been saying.
Bioarchitects.net, which is how to make
That's what you've
sense.
been saying. I finally agree with you.
And
That's why I'm saying thank you for, because when I hooked this thing up, you should see this. I got 12 magnets and opposite poles and try it and just see how I feel. I'm not doing the motor yet, but just you can feel it.
I can feel
It's
you holding it from here, actually.
I imagine, because this
It's
is
so that's fire crystal, PHIRE, firecrystal.com. And what causes it to go, as in Atlantis, is called a phase conjugate pump wave, like the Schumann cascade, which is also the motor of how pyramids made global wireless power, pyramidwirelesspower.com. So the phase conjugate pump wave, for example, your breath or a fire dramatically triggers that crystal to zap to push out a longitudinal directionally, because the one end is a cap, of course. And that is, you can use it, for example, for healing. And if you point that at water and charge it, the taste in the water will be dramatically affected because indeed the water is a receiver for the longitudinal array because of how fractal, of course, hydrogen
I'm
is.
putting it in my tea and I've tried it in the water. So, but I tell you, I'm doing experiments with it, and I'm
Right.
an engineer, a scientist guy, and when I was before I was always doing the teenager Tesla experiments, building antennas, CB radios. My dad had all kinds of copper, platinum, 5,000-volt transformers. We were doing all kinds of stuff, and I
Cool.
couldn't wait
Cool.
to get educated so I could do some real science instead of playing. And the
Yep.
time has come again. So
Yeah.
that's
So
why I appreciate you sending me some of that stuff.
We're,
That's
we're going to we have more ideas. So this is the unified field. Now we have the key to the principle behind vacuum energy. We know exactly what vacuum energy is. It's the ability to implode charge, the sparky sweet circuit, all these circuits we've been researching for years with Bill Donovan, our fractalfield.com/propulsion team, our nanotech team. They're all based on phase conjugate charge collapse. So this is a conversation to be continued. I think we
right.
did really wonderful here tonight. Mark, I want to thank you. I
Yeah.
think we've
Well,
delivered
thank you,
the
Dan.
enthusiasm.
Yeah, thank you. And I want to, I appreciate you setting this up. And I already had my plan of what I was going to do. So next time I'm going to prepare a little bit more because I wanted to show the axioms better. I didn't know I was going to do that today. I wanted to just focus on four, and I realized, I should probably show all five of them. So I'm going to get that. What we're going to do is slowly work through the axioms. We started with four, the fundamental one, and then next time I want to do some fundamental stuff. You see how real quickly it blossoms into this complex stuff. don't hesitate to do that. But I always want to go back to how we connect it to actually what's happening. Because so often, like I told Liz, I said, there's all these people doing their thing. And we're not followers, but I was sampling everybody. There's people selling stuff, making stuff, claiming stuff. I need to see results, and there's results with what you're doing and with what even some of Hermane's stuff. There's this I've seen his seed experiments. You get 30% growth, and he
Yeah,
he knows why, you know.
yeah.
He knows why. Now, closing comment, I think, we're open researchers. I don't have any clearance and no allegiances to anybody except for the country. I'm patriotic. This is stuff that anybody with AI, it's designed you can suck it right off the blog if you know what you're doing. So the whole thing's out there for free. It's already, anybody who knows what they're doing can be checking and saying, wow, hey, I want to load up their toe. And you can basically do it, investigate on your own. And that means you can design anything you want to right now. You can go say,
Design
in the big,
implosion.
right. So people can do design whatever they want. The other thing I really want to do is find where the theory fails. I haven't found it to fail yet. I've been trying. That's what I've been trying. That's why you see hundreds of papers. I'm trying to find out where it fails. It's not just, hey, Mark likes to crank out papers. I want to find out where it fails. And that's why it's so much fun. It's so easy. Could have had it solved decades ago, but when you have disharmony, an active enemy working against us, and that's what we have in the world that's being exposed. So
And
hang in there. We'll see how it goes.
and just a reminder, behind all of this actually is the physics of what makes a force centripetal and negentropic is ultimately the definition of the physics of peacemaking, because that stability, that negentropy at the center, is the ultimate definition of the ultimate peace. This is what
Yeah.
our curriculum at peaceuniversity.net from years ago. So we have defined peacemaking, we've defined bliss as an energy, defined soul as an electrical, defined gravity. All of these things are simple, elementary, once you understand charge collapse and tuning them to the Planck and the proton. That's how powerful and fun this golden toe, fractalgut.com is. So with that,
And
thank you so much, Mark. We had great fun. To be continued. And as you said, next time, even more detail and even more pure principles.
And it is fun. Don't anybody get scared because the guys I talk to say second order wave equations is child's play. And we're talking guys right out of college and they laugh because I work with the top graduates and they know it's easy. So I'm telling these young guys that all this physics and they're like eating it up. So, but I got to be careful.
Yeah, Mark and I are having more fun than we've ever had in our lives. Hello.
Oh yeah, that's why I told you I'm getting all of my stuff back together. You wouldn't believe, Dan, I had a ball of platinum. Just we gave it to a nun. Do you know how much that'd be worth? Thousands of dollars today. It was thermocouple platinum, you know. Oh boy, we had lots of fun back then. There's a reason why they broke down the steel mills and sent us all asunder. They don't want us talking. Look at you. You're over in France and I'm over here. So a little bit of communication goes a long way, and that's what this is about. It's the great awakening.
Ultimately, when a free radical is free electrically and socially, the free radical is free when it's distributed perfectly in a fractal array. And on that note, bye from
Thanks,
the free
Dan. I'll see
radical.
you. Okay, bye.
See you at
See you.
fractalgut.com. Bye bye. Blessings.
Bye.
Blessings.